the latest edition of What's the Word, the radio broadcast that brings you news of our Area 1 community. I'm Army Staff Sergeant Crystal Crawford, and now here's the host of What's the Word, Mr. Frank Fischer of the USAG Red Cloud and Area 1 Public Affairs Office.
Thanks, Sergeant Crawford. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of What's the Word. Well, Area 1 friends, here we are in the month of June, and summer is nearly here officially, and that's good, because as we all know, there are all kinds of great fun things we can do when summer's here. But summer here in Korea is also the season of the monsoon rains. And with that comes at least the potential for rainfall so heavy that before you know it, there's major flooding, landslides, and even maybe loss of life. Just in case you're thinking that that kind of destructive weather isn't all that likely in this area, stay tuned to this edition of What's the Word, because in a moment we'll tell you what happened right here on our very own Area 1 installations nearly 5 short years ago. It was summer of 2011. That's when Korea and Area 1 itself got hit with its worst flooding in a century. And because we know that every summer Area 1 has to be ready just in case, on today's broadcast we'll tell you what Area 1 is doing to be ready should we get hit hard again. And we'll tell you what you should do individually. We'll also talk about one other summer weather hazard that's not actually part of the monsoon weather, but that happens to kick in around the same time of year. It's one that can cause you very serious health problems, and that's mold. We'll tell you how to spot it, what dangers it poses to you, and what you should do if you see it growing. And here to give us the word on the summer hazards of monsoon rains and mold is today's guest. He is Mr. Marshall Downs. He's with the U.S. Army Garrison Red Cloud and Area 1. He works in the Garrison's Directorate of Public Works, better known as DPW. He is the ever-busy, ever-on-the-go chief of DPW's Operations and Maintenance Division. Just before we hear from Mr. Downs, I'll give you a quick snapshot of the hard hit we took from the monsoon rains of 2011. It happened after record rainfall struck a large swath of Korea. For us, that meant northern Gyeonggi province, which is where you and I are here in Area 1. It also hit Seoul, Korea's capital, to the south of Area 1. It hit us in late July, and it did extensive damage at Camp Casey, Camp Hovey, and Camp Obel, all of them in the city of Dongducheon. The rain triggered landslides, flooded barracks, washed out roads, clogged drainage systems, disrupted combat training areas. It deluged a swimming pool that had just been renovated, and it left that pool and some other properties under a sea of mud. The floodwaters also surged into the Camp Casey Theater and saturated the seats and a lot else. And as I said, it was late July, so it was hot and damp, and the water and mud inside the theater gave way to what else? Mold and mildew. And the extent of that mold and mildew was so bad that the Garrison's engineers and other experts thought the theater might never be usable again. In the end, it took a major renovation to bring the theater back to life and to turn it into the nice-looking Camp Casey Theater we enjoy today. Well, Mr. Downs, it's good to have you with us again on What's the Word. And first off, when is the monsoon season for those who are new to Korea?
Well, normally the monsoon goes from the end of June to the first 2 weeks of July. But as you said, the last century rainstorm or monsoon that we had happened in July. It rained 30 days prior to the actual 20-some plus inches that we got to cause the flash flooding from the monsoon. So normally 2 to 3 weeks monsoon, then we start preparing for typhoon. But it could go longer or shorter, so we have to be prepared.
Right, and we're going to hear about those preparations. One of the things for our listeners who are maybe new to Asia, when we talk about a typhoon, just in case you don't know, a typhoon is just another name for a hurricane. So typhoon, hurricane, bad thing, potentially really ferocious, and that, as Mr. Downs just mentioned, is one of the things that can come out of the monsoon season. They can turn into hurricanes, or as we call them here in this part of the world, typhoons. You and your colleagues at DPW were at the very center of the big response that the garrison mounted to respond in the face of those floods in 5 years ago, 2011, and the recovery effort, of course. Tell us, what did that involve? Just how big a deal was that?
Well, I will tell you, Frank, it took us, we worked 76 straight days to recover the community, to get it back to normal operations, where we had the barracks dug out, the sewer systems, the drainage systems, the pool back up and running, having everything to common. But it took us 1 week to get everything up and running as utilities. We had Area 2, Area 3, Area 4 DPWs lent us equipment, manpower, 2ID threw hundreds of soldiers at us, which they worked very hard, physically digging out the barracks that were, the landslides just completely took over the building with mud. These guys dug. So it was a lot of entailed work. The biggest thing is the big Army, MCOM headquarters, gave us $18.7 million for flood recovery that we put into mitigation efforts throughout Camp Casey and prevention of future possible mishaps with flooding. So that's where we're at.
And that's really huge. I mean, any soldier, airman, anybody here in Area 1 can just, even if they weren't here, they can just picture what a huge thing that would have been. 2ID soldiers, and I got here just about a month after this happened, and I saw the photos of 2ID soldiers digging things out, and I saw the Casey Theater when it was all but condemned, quarantined virtually. Yeah, quite a thing. Well, if we were hit with heavy rainstorms like that again, I know DPW would spring into action. What would they do? What would DPW do in that case? Well,
one of the things I would like to bring out, that most of the work prepping for monsoon and typhoon is being done now. So we've already had the IPRs, and we're continuing doing the IPRs, telling the units, hey, clean out those turtle ditches in your footprint. Clean out the areas where water is going to build up and cause flooding. So make sure that your drain areas are clear, that you have coordinated with DPW to get sand, especially in the Casey Hovey area, so you can fill your sandbags and pre-position your sandbags. Now for the CRC enclave, Camp Jackson, Camp Stanley, Camp Red Cloud, they're already pre-positioned when given the word. So most of it is the mitigation that we do beforehand. Because when we get the amount of rain that we got in 2011, it's very difficult for anybody to be out there, because flash floods, there's no controlling water. So you get your people to safety, you get the equipment that you need to safety during that time, and pretty much you ride it out till it's finished, and the operations start when it's done, so you can start recovery.
Right. Mr. Ha, Yoon Ha, the director of DPW, the head of DPW, was telling me, this was some many months back, I was in a conversation, and he was saying that during this time of flooding, right here in this part of the country, in Area 1, he went downstairs in his apartment complex, and it was just, a sea. The flood waters had just rolled right in. So, yeah, it affects it can affect those of us on the installations, those of us off the installations, soldier or civilian, if you're in this area during the monsoon season. Well, we'll hear more about the monsoon season and give you a few more things that you should keep in mind to help you be ready for it. And then we're going to talk about something that can destroy your clothes and make you very sick, give you something as bad potentially as asthma or some other upper respiratory illness, and that's mold, in the course of today's broadcast. We'll be back after the break.
We're back with What's the Word Hour, and here's Frank Fischer.
Thanks, Sergeant Crawford. We're talking today about two big summer weather hazards here in Korea. We've talked so far on today's broadcast about monsoon rains and the floods and landslides that they can bring upon us. Now we turn to the topic of mold. It's really important because it can be really harmful to your health. We'll hear how to spot it and what to do about it. Telling us about that is our guest, Mr. Marshall Downs of Area 1 DPW. DPW, of course, is Directorate of Public Works. Mr. Downs, first, just when is the mold season?
Mold season is from May to October. May to October.
Mm-hmm. And what exactly causes mold, and what does it look like? How can somebody spot it if it's in their residence or their office?
Mold is caused by moisture. And when moisture is not dried up in Korea in this type of weather with the humidity and the heat, they'll start seeing brown and black spots forming. That's the signs of mold.
And you've told us in the past that it's not only harmful to property, but that it's dangerous to health, too. Starting with health, then, what are the hazards? What can it do to people?
Most people complain of respiratory issues with mold, and some people have some skin allergies. Those are the two main things that we hear about.
And what about property? What can it do to property?
Well, it gets into the furniture, and if you don't catch it quick, once it gets deep into the furniture, you got to turn it into housing and get it replaced, and then we got to destroy it. And if you don't report mold, if you don't clean the mold yourselves, because there's some mold you need to clean yourselves, and then there's some mold that you need to call DPW and bring us in. And we'll talk about that more later in detail, but the biggest thing is identifying it, cleaning, or calling.
Mm-hmm. And I recall that it can also even mess with your clothes, right? It can get on clothes.
Yes, it can mess with your clothes. Like I said, any place that is damp and has moisture, but a lot of times you have to open up your closet doors at night and let air get in there. And if the air circulates in there, keeps your clothes dry, you shouldn't have any mold issues.
If in the case of furniture, as you mentioned a moment ago, if furniture has begun to develop mold, what will that look like? Will it be the same thing where you see
it'll start out white, brownish, and you'll see it form and clean it right away. You know, don't clean it with if it's a fabric, don't clean it with bleach, because if you clean it with bleach, you'll stain it. A soapy warm water solution normally will take care of it.
And what about the things that, how does one know what things are okay for them to try to get to deal with directly in the case of mold, and how does one know, oh no, I better not touch that, for that I need to call DPW? How can they know?
Most mold can be cleaned by the individual. Most mold in Korea develops in the bathroom / latrines, whatever you want to call them. And that's because of the moisture. It starts forming mold. But if you go and wipe your shower down after you get out of the shower, make sure your exhaust fan works. If your exhaust fan doesn't work, call in a service order so we can send our electricians out there and either replace or fix your exhaust fan. Once we get that fixed, that's part of the problem. That'll draw the moisture out of your bathroom. Like I said, the biggest thing is in the summer, wipe your bathroom down. I'd rather see a wet towel in the corner than a bunch of mold in your bathroom. Normally, you won't get it in your bedroom or your sleeping area if you keep your windows closed and your doors closed. And if your AC doesn't work, call a service order in immediately so DPW can get out there. Now, we might not get out there the same hour that you called, but we'll be out there within 7 days to fix your AC.
And when people are doing their own cleaning, when they're dealing with mold directly, I would just guess that one of the things, if I were to spot mold in my home and wanted to clean it, I guess one of the things that I would be well advised to do would be to wear plastic gloves, the same way I would if I were using bleach or something to clean
plastic gloves. And when we're talking bathroom, plastic gloves, the warm bleach water. But normally, and I'm not an expert, so I don't want to be quoted as expert.
Sure.
But usually, the mold has to be where it becomes a dust, where it becomes a factor as far as respiratory. So if it's in your bathroom and it's moisture, you're pretty safe that unless you're rubbing really hard and it goes up in your face, you're not going to breathe it in. So as long as you got some type of gloves, hand protection for the bleach, you should be okay.
And what kinds of things can DPW do about this? You said that, if you call, then certainly within 7 days, maybe less, but anyway, within a week, somebody would be there.
Mold is a different situation because mold has health hazards. As soon as we get a service order for mold, we try to react to that as quickly as possible within 24 hours so that we can assess it and see if it's something we need to fix or do we need to advise the customer or the soldier on what they need to do to fix the situation. But the first thing, anytime that you find mold or you think you have mold, the first call should be to DPW. Let us assess it, and then we'll make a determination if we need to bring environmental or preventive med or industrial health in to look at it.
Great. That's an important point, to call DPW first and go from there. Well, we'll return after the break.
And I'll be right back with your weather, exchange rate, and gas prices. I'm Army Staff Sergeant Crystal Crawford, and we're back with What's the Word Hour, and here's Frank Fischer.
Thanks, Sergeant Crawford. Hello again, and if you're just joining us, we've been talking today about two summer weather hazards. First, the monsoon rains that can lead to floods and landslides, and second, mold. We've been hearing about those hazards with our guest, Mr. Marshall Downs of Area 1 DPW. I'll give you a quick recap of what we've heard today. First, talking about monsoon rains and the dangers of that. The main thing is that DPW, the Area 1 Directorate of Public Works, is well-equipped, well-trained, and has a lot of experience in how to prepare for these kinds of rains, which can bring floods, can bring landslides, and how to recover from them. But if you are a unit, if you have responsibility for buildings, properties at a unit or an office, there are some things to remember, and the main thing is to look at the drainage areas in your work area, the turtle ditches, any area that could where debris could accumulate, and make sure that it's clear. Clear those areas. Get sandbags if they're not already in place. Get them, fill them, pre-position them, put them in the areas that you have reason to know, or have reason to think would be likely to flood if we did have heavy rains. And of course, when in doubt, call DPW. If you're not sure of where to put them or where to get them, or if you think you would benefit from any guidance at all on how to prepare your unit area for the heavy rains of the monsoon season, call DPW. The monsoon season, by the way, as we said earlier, runs typically from June to September, but as Mr. Downs pointed out at the start of the broadcast, that's what typically happens, but who's to say? It can, like any season of weather, it can come in early, it can go out late. The key is to be prepared. About mold is a fungus, and it can get started on wood, on fabric, on carpets, on food, and it's a spore that travels, and when it lands, it starts to, and particularly when it finds moisture, it starts to eat whatever it's on, and so one of the keys is to keep your air conditioning on, keep your windows and doors shut, and if you even think that you've got mold growing, call DPW first. They'll tell you what to do. If it's something that you can take care of yourself, they'll help you figure that out and tell you how to do it if you don't already know how to clean mold in your home. And if it's something that they judge requires them to send out a team, then they'll come out and they'll take care of it. So that's a recap. Mr. Downs, is there anything you'd like to add to what we've said today about these things?
No, Frank, I think that's about it.
All right. Good. Well, thank you for... Good. Thank you for joining us again today on What's the Word. This is not your first appearance with us, and we're always glad to see you. Our guest has been Mr. Marshall Downs, Chief of the Operations and Maintenance Division of the U.S. Army Garrison Red Cloud and Area 1's Directorate of Public Works, better known as DPW. What's the Word airs every other Thursday at 3 p.m. here on AFN KCV Eagle. I'm Frank Fischer of the Area 1 Public Affairs Office. I've been your host for What's the Word, handing back now to my What's the Word broadcast partner, AFN KC DJ, Army Staff Sergeant Crystal Crawford. Until next time, thank you for joining us. Here's Sergeant Crawford.
And as Mr. Fisher said, thanks for joining us for this edition of What's the Word, and I'll be right back with your weather, exchange rate, and gas prices.